So welcome everyone to the Wednesday morning series. This is the fifth week of the month in May, and Debbie Allen, who co-hosts the Codependent Drop-In Group on Wednesdays for partners, had made a suggestion. She had two people that are in the category of should I stay or should I go, and so she suggested this topic. They have graciously offered to step into this space, and so we are presenting this recording webinar to discuss this topic. There is zero judgment. Everybody has to make their own, but we thought this could be a useful topic and hear input from people who have made decisions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to get this rolling.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. So welcome everybody. My name is Debbie Allen, and I just a little bit about myself. So I received my credentials in 2015 as a certified sex addiction therapist, and I opened my own business, A Safe Place to Share. From there, I also went on to get my credentials as a partner trauma therapist and an inner child specialist. So I work with sex addicts and partners of sex addicts, and I also facilitate a codependence drop-in group for seeking integrity. I do that every other Wednesday, and that prompted me to want to do this talk today because this group, I've been doing this group for a long time, and it is an amazing group of women, and they are incredibly supportive of one another. But every now and then I would hear the words, I'm, hopeless and stuck and despair. And I thought, but there is hope out there and there is healing. But sometimes when you are unable to get out of that place, you need to have other voices of women so that you can hear that. And so I have these two women that became part of my life and my work world. And I thought they would be perfect to join this talk. So I'll just give you a little bit about them, and then they are going to share about themselves. So Shelley, actually, I met through a group that I was doing in 2018. And she was part of this Betrayed Partners group, but her husband was actually my client. And so Paul encouraged her to take the group, and Paul has graciously allowed me to share this information today. And so he is the captain of a large commercial airline in the US, and he is in incredible recovery and opened up his own business coaching and helping men called Direct Approach. And so that's how I met Shelley. Carrie, I met in 2021 in November, and she actually became my client. And so we have been working together, and I thought that she would just be perfect for this talk. So I think I'm going to move to you, Shelley, first, and let you tell a little bit about your story, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to start by, thanking you both for participating in this today and having us here. I think it's so important that we can connect like this and support each other. And Debbie, you're the common denominator here, and you've been such a catalyst in my life. And I know you get the credit for a lot of Paul's healing as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I will say I'm a little nervous. I was getting ready and I was like, what earrings go with, revealing the worst thing that's ever happened to you? But I'm also really happy to be here. I've been working with Betrayed Partners for the last year as a yoga therapist. And I was doing a practicum, and so I've had clients, and I finally finished, got my certification in January. And my area of focus was betrayal trauma, and coming up with mindfulness and movement practices that address the issues that are around betrayal trauma. So largely that's anxiety, depression, many of the criteria for PTSD, which is often a diagnosis for partners. So, my story started about 8 years ago. It'll be 8 years this fall. And the first big reveal was it seemed like I discovered that my husband was having an affair. And now, of course, it's like, oh, a simple affair. So, like many people's stories, over the next 7 months, we began to unearth secret after secret. And it turned out he had long-term affairs, short-term affairs, sex workers, lots of dishonesty. Some of these people were close friends of ours, neighbors, a whole mix of different kinds of people. And he decided after the 7-month mark, he needed help and decided to go away for residential treatment. So that was a big decision, a big step in his own healing. And of course, in retrospect, I look back at it and it was hard because, at that time I was so traumatized. I wanted to control his recovery and, know what was going on and be there for every step of it. But it also gave me a chance to just focus on myself. And I thought of something kind of funny when I was, going back and thinking about all the things that happened then. So we had a standing appointment with a couples therapist because we had been doing, work since the onset of discovery. And so I went ahead and went a few days after he had left for residential treatment. And I was a college professor then, so I had the summer off and I went in and I have an ambitious personality and I sat down and I said, okay, I've got 8 weeks to heal. What are the books I need to read to learn how to do this? And she looked at me and she said, there are no books. You need to go sit in a chair and stare out the window and feel your feelings. And I was like, that sounds horrible. I just want to feel my Amazon cart. That makes sense to me. Um, so not that day, because I fought hard to keep that perspective. But a few days after that, there was a quiet voice, very quiet, like I could barely hear it. But inside of me, there was a voice that said, there's more than what you have been choosing. And the work that you need to do has nothing to do with him and what he's done to you. And of course, that was very hard. And I didn't even know where to start at that time. But I think that was one of the things that happened to me that allowed me to have my own journey through the recovery process. So he had his, I had mine, and obviously we had the times and the ways that we were coming together. But a lot of the work that I needed to do, stemmed from my childhood origin. My father was an alcoholic, and neither my husband nor I had a really good role model for what a healthy relationship looked like. Our parents loved us fiercely. They did nothing wrong. They were, doing the best that they could. But we didn't, as a couple, we didn't really know what a marriage looked like. And in particular, my husband received some very, toxic ideas. Like one was, son, it's okay to lie to women. That was, something he grew up hearing.
Hmm.
So, um, so fast forward, fast forward, please. It was an awful time. I'd like to fast forward. It took years, and I think that's the worst part of all this is when you're in the beginning stages of it, all you want is for the horrible feelings to go away, the pain to go away. You want to feel stable and safe, but it takes forever. It takes so long to do that. And I got really sick of that analogy of like, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but it really is. And even now where we are in our relationship, we're just starting to do some of the couples work because it took that long for us to be strong enough on our own to come together. But I think one beautiful thing that comes out of it when you're on the other side is there's just this freedom when you live honestly with transparency and you have each other's back in a relationship and you put the relationship first, you get to build what you want. And it's a really incredible process to be able to do that. I know that I'm very fortunate. My husband has not relapsed since going away. That being said, I mean, we have had so much difficulty. We basically had to shut out everyone in our lives and start from scratch, rebuilding our connections and friends and family members. I've been really fortunate. My family and friends have been so supportive of both of us. He has not been so fortunate. So he's had to have a lot of courage to get where he is now, and he's helping other people, which is wonderful. Um, so I think that in terms of hope and in terms of the sort of title of should I stay or should I go? Oh, there were so many times I thought I should go. So many times. Like, how do you even envision forgiving and forgetting these kinds of things? But I think one thing that was interesting for me was as I was traumatized and devastated by all of this, he was also unraveling. It was not a pleasant experience for him either. And the pain that he's had to conjure up and deal with through therapy has been difficult too. So in terms of the stay or the go question, it is very personal, as Tammy was saying, and there is no judgment. That has to be a very personal experience. The partners that I'm working with now, you know, they're people in both camps of that. And every time I hear their stories, you know, at the onset of meeting them, my heart just fills up with compassion for the partner and for the addict because it's a terrible process for everyone involved.
Thank you, Shelley, for sharing that. Thank you. Yeah, so you know, I'm going to move now to you, Carrie. Your story is a little bit different, but still full of hope and healing. And so why don't you share with everybody a little bit about your story?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on here. It's really quite an honor. So yeah, my husband, John and I, we've been married almost 11 years. We were married almost 11 years. Um, and I really, truly thought he was my happily ever after. I mean, he was this handsome, sweet, gentle, very soft-spoken kind of a guy. And he just was just everything I was looking for. But shortly after we married, I think things started to unravel, and I didn't understand why. I thought, well, this is the second marriage for us both. It's a blended family. Just deal. Like this is like you've never dealt with this before. You're just going to have to give on some things, right? So I tried to do that, but I was seeing that there were just no boundaries put in place on his end. There was an ex-wife that was very difficult. There were children that were very difficult. His family hated me from the time they knew my name. So that was really difficult. And he was not protecting me at all in any way, shape, or form. And so I really struggled with that. And so fast forward to about almost 8 years into our marriage is when D-Day happened for me. It was September of 2021, and I was absolutely, completely blindsided. All of a sudden, my life imploded, and I had never heard of sex addiction. I'd never heard the term betrayal trauma. I had no idea what I was dealing with. This man that I have been married to all of this time has turned into this kind of monster, to be honest, when it happened. And I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going crazy. I had never experienced anything like this before in my life. So I started kind of, Shelley, what you did. I was an educator for 20 years. And so I'm like, okay, what am I dealing with? I think a lot of women do this. What am I dealing with? So I get the books and I've listened to podcasts, and I'm now holding the reins of recovery. So it's like, I can't control what's happening, so I'm going to control this. So John, you need to go to this therapist, and you need to read this book and listen to this podcast, and you need to go here and here and here and here. And in the meantime, he's backing away from me. I'm trying to run to him to try to fix it. And it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. It was not working. So like Shelley, like your husband, John did go away to an intensive, actually with Boulder Recovery. And I thought, okay, this is it, right? He's gonna, every podcast I'm listening to, every book I'm reading, it says that they can get help, and this is going to be great for us. And in the meantime, I had discovered the Sarah Society, which is a group of betrayed women. It was born out of the Samson Society. So I joined that, and he went off to Boulder, and I actually went to the first retreat for Sarah Society. And when he got back, I'm like, we're going to be great. This is going to be great. And it was great for about a week. And then it got really bad, really bad. And that's when I got in touch with Debbie, and gosh, she saw me at my very worst. And it was really hard. And I just kept holding on to hope. I kept holding on to hope. But then you've heard the old adage, hope deferred makes the heart sick, right? And so he kept giving me these, every once in a while, he would give me these little glimmers of like, he would tell me what he was like learning in recovery. But he was learning the lingo of recovery. And he was saying that to me. He was saying it to me. He was saying it to the guys in his groups. He was saying it to his therapists. And it was all just manipulation, honestly. I don't want to say he didn't learn anything. I do think he has learned some things, but that hope deferred makes the heart sick was making me very, very sick. In fact, I ended up developing celiac disease from the trauma that I experienced through this whole thing. I was hospitalized with a bleeding ulcer, which still on occasion comes back depending on my amount of stress. I had joint health issues, all kinds of physical ailments. And I had to face the fact that John was not getting better. There were times where I really felt he was getting worse. And he was literally killing me from the inside out. And I think years ago, after my first divorce, I had kind of made an inner vow to myself I was never going to get divorced again. And I held that. And Debbie, bless her heart, she was like, okay, let's, what's holding you here? And I'm like, I can't do this again. Like I've told myself I'm not ever going to do this again. But I realized that I did everything in my power. For 3 years. I really went to war for him, for the marriage. And he didn't even lace up his boots. And so my dad will always say, it's a common thing my dad says, you can't push a rope. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't push the rope. So I remember thinking and wondering, like, what could I have done differently to make him not do this? What could I have done? And then I remembered that Jesus couldn't have loved Judas any more than he did for Judas not to betray him. Why? Because Judas was a betrayer. I couldn't have been thinner, prettier, kinder, softer, better for John to not betray me. Why? Because John was a betrayer. And I struggled with my faith. I grew up, in the church. I grew up with a strong relationship with God. And gosh, my faith really took a tumble for a while. There was a crisis of faith for sure. And I questioned God, and I wondered if he did even existed. Like, I've lived my whole life for you. Why are you allowing this to happen? Like, I loved him. I was faithful to him. I tried to help him, but I had to realize, and it took a lot of therapy. Debbie is a hero in my world, because I couldn't have ever done any of this without her help and guidance. But I had to learn that my prayers and my faith had to be bigger than my feelings,
Mhm.
right? And I had to keep filtering my feelings through prayer, because those feelings would have driven me to really bad places and would have kept me there a whole lot longer than I ever wanted to stay there. So I had to start to remember and understand that God was still there, and there He has promised that He will take those broken pieces, and He will create something that we could never really imagine. And that's where that's where I found myself.
Mhm. So what was the turning point, Carrie? Because you're right. I saw you at your worst, and everybody sees you today and can't even imagine, what it was like. And I remember you saying, I spent the night on the bathroom floor, just unwell emotionally and physically and crying. And, these were your darkest times. And so as you went along, like, what was the switch that flipped that you thought, I just can't do this anymore? Because I know you lived in a lot of fear of change and moving.
Yeah, yeah. I was so sick. I was
Mm.
sick, and I was trying to do my job, and I was trying to live my life, and I was looking around, and I'm like, I don't recognize anything. I don't know what my life is. What is happening? And He wasn't changing. In fact, He was getting worse and worse to me all the time. And I think for every woman, there will come a time, if you're going to leave, there will come a time where you're like, I'm done.
Mm.
I'm just done. I've tried everything. I can go to bed at night knowing that I did everything in my power to fix this, and I can't fix it, and He's not changing. And I deserve a better life. I deserve a better life. And so I was terrified to go. He was a physician. He was the breadwinner. I was making money. I had a job, but it wasn't, the lifestyle that we were used to living. And so Debbie was like, you ever considered maybe going into coaching? And I was like, no, no, I have not. And no, I will not. No, the answer is no. And so she was so patient and gracious with me. And she kept, like, every now and then she'd be like, I think maybe you might want to consider, you've got like, there's going to be a lot of letters after your name if you do this, but the greatest thing behind your name is betrayed partner. And so I really prayed about it. And I was searching for something that could turn the ashes into some kind of purpose and beauty in my life. I think there's parts of my story I will never understand. But I knew that God could do that for me, right? So I went and got some trauma training, and then I went and got my coaching license. And I have since created a company called Heart of Hope Coaching. And I now am able to work with betrayed women and men. Actually, I have a couple men clients. And I named it Heart of Hope because I remember the days. And honestly, there are still days, Debbie knows this, there are still days where I'm crying. Like, the grief waves are a real thing. Like, I haven't, like, made it, right? I don't want to give that perception at all. I still struggle. I'm still in therapy every week. It's a constant thing for me. But Heart of Hope, I remember being in the depths of despair and thinking, there is no hope. I'm never going to be okay. I don't see how ever I could be okay.
Mhm.
And so I want to be able to now reach down into that really dark pit and pull those women up and hold the hope for them until they're able to find it for themselves again, because they will. And you
Mhm.
ladies and men listening, if you do choose to go, you and I know what a hard decision it is. I know it personally, but you can succeed. You can find hope. You can choose you without him. And it's hard and it's devastating and it's a really long, painful road. And you cannot do it alone.
Mhm.
They always say addicts need a connection. They need their people. Well, so do we. We need other women and therapists and people who have been a little further down the road that can come around us and speak life and hope and health into us when we can't hold it for ourselves. And so I can't stress that enough. Like, this is really dark waters that you have to navigate through. And I think I'll always be in a healing road. I'll always need therapy and help. And I think I'm always going to have to learn. Like, I haven't made it, but God has really pulled the pieces of my life. All those yucky, ugly. I read a quote somewhere where Maya Angelou said, as soon as healing takes place, go out and heal somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so that's my purpose from the pain. And I absolutely love what I'm doing.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from both of you, you know, regardless of whether you stay or go, you know, I've heard in your sharing that you cannot work the program for him. No. Or her. You cannot. Like, I heard you say that, Shelley, right out of the gate. Like, you had to focus on you. And the same with you, Carrie, how you went into this overdrive of over functioning and providing everything for him. And it's just not going to work. It has to be a change of heart. And so Shelley, you shared with me 3 really amazing areas that you clung on to for your healing. And so I'd like you to share that with everyone and how you sort of came up with this and why.
Sure. Thank you. So when we initially talked about doing this and I started to piece together, I was trying to think of like, okay, well, how did I get through this? And I think one of the best ways I got through it was I had a practice that encouraged me to be still and quiet. And that's yoga. So I've had a 30-year yoga practice. I was a yoga teacher before a yoga therapist. And, when the therapist said, go sit in the chair and look out the window, feel your feelings, like, that's not a joke. I mean, that, as Carrie said, the grieving process, it doesn't end, but you have to befriend grief. Mm-hmm. And be able to sit with yourself and be still and be quiet and listen. And it's not fun. It's a very difficult and sad thing to do, but it makes you stronger and more resilient. And, because I'm a body worker, I can feel these things in my body now. I'll be walking and I'll have a memory and here, grief is here. I can feel her in my heart. And you learn that these emotions are supposed to move through you. Motion moves. So I think for me, I didn't really grow up learning how to feel emotions. And I went into academia, which is like, you don't need emotions in that field. You just like think all the time. Great, I love that. So that was a huge part, really learning how to be still and be quiet. And that's what I try to help people do now too, is help move things through the body. The other thing is finding a meaning and purpose. And Carrie talked about that. I love the name of your coaching company. That's a huge part of it too. I didn't personally do step work, but I'm very familiar with it just from being in this realm. And the last one is give back. So finding a way that you can turn what's happened to you into something bright and beautiful that you can share. And in the early days, you don't have to worry about that. You need to heal and focus on yourself. But if you can envision a time where you might be able to impart some wisdom or share, or even even just be nicer out in the world and less judgmental. Maybe you don't have to be a coach or a yoga therapist or you know, work directly with people, but just be less judgmental, be kinder, support people. I had a friend, most of my friends are yoga teachers and they're on a path, they like self-introspection. So when I began to do this work, I had a lot of good connections and support. And one of my friends who's not in that area, she would text me like about every other day at the beginning, and she'd say, "I love you. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. What do you need?" That's
Mm,
it. Same text, you know, some version of that text. And that was like so beautiful. She didn't need to solve my problems. She didn't need to say the right thing. She just let me know she loved me. And I think if you can do that for other people, even something that small, um, I go back, one of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. He was in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And when he was taken in, he knew that he had to survive because the story needed to be told. And
mm,
I'm certainly not equating being surviving the Holocaust with this situation, but like that premise, that perspective of I can survive this because it's going to matter. So
mhm,
I think that's really important, Debbie, is that meaning and that purpose part of it.
mhm,
And then the last thing that you and I had talked about was your support network. So a lot of hard lessons in the beginning. You know, I didn't know what sex addiction was, and most people don't unless they've had some reason to. And there's a lot of misconceptions. We had a family member say, that's not recognized in the DSM-5, and it's also not recognized by the World Health Organization, so that's not a thing. And so, like, right away, you have to learn not everyone has earned the right to hear your story, and not everyone gets to be in your life anymore. Because when you're a little bit toxic, guess who you attract? Toxic people. And so one of the things going through this is kind of a clean sweep of your friend and even your, sadly, your family group. If people can't be on board and be supportive and be kind and shut up if they can't say anything, you know, kind or supportive, um, that's a really tough part of it. But as I mentioned, I have a lot of yoga teacher friends. And so I had people who were not only concerned about me, but were also concerned about what my husband was experiencing. And I know in the beginning that was a little conflicting for me because, you know, you want to be the victim. Like, what? He did all this stuff to me. Why do you care about him? But that was really beautiful as we started to go through it. And I appreciated that people were able to remain neutral.
mhm,
And when Paul did his step work, he got an opportunity to go back and make amends to all of those people. And, you know, they received that lovingly and forgivingly. So I think the people in your life, um, and unfortunately, not everyone is going to get to stay.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Shelley, for that. Carrie, what did you change in your life that was maybe easy things to change, but also difficult things to change? Like Shelley was saying, getting rid of, you know, some friends or that have benefited you in terms of this, you know, healing and hope. What were the changes that you had to make?
I lost people
Mm,
because they showed up and showed me that they weren't safe for me. They didn't really they didn't understand what this was. And so, you know, that was really hard to, but the more you're in therapy and the more you're learning about all of this, the more you understand how important those boundaries are for your continued healing and recovery. So that was a change I had to do. That was hard. Remove some people from my life. Even some family. You know, I love my parents. They are so supportive of me, but they've not lived this. They don't understand it. And it's really hard. And so, you know, when I don't have a husband, I want to go to my mom and dad to say, this is happening, but I've learned I can't, you know, I've just had to kind of relearn some things, like who's safe to talk to. I mean, they're safe people and they love me and would do anything for me, but in this situation, not not safe. Yeah, gosh, other things I had to change. For women and going through this, like I had to change what I was watching, what I was reading, what I was listening to. The triggers that would hit me, were I had to change all of that, which was sometimes okay, sometimes hard, sometimes easy, but that was another thing I had to change. And then learning how to live alone. It's been incredibly difficult for me. Um, my two boys are grown adults now and they're out doing their own thing. I have two rescue dogs who honestly are my babies. And I don't know what I would do. They're like my therapy dogs. But learning to live alone and do the boy jobs around the house that I never had to do before. Like I've learned that I can. I've learned that I am stronger and more capable than I ever thought I was. And that's one thing I've learned through this is that there's more to me than being a wife. There's more to me than being a mom, more to me than being a teacher that I was, or a real estate agent, or now a coach. Like there's more to me, and I am stronger than I ever thought I was. Don't get me wrong though. Let me just make this clear. There are days where I'm like, I can't do this. Still to this day. And I work with women and I'm telling them, the things that I need to be telling myself, but I'm human, right? There are days where I get on with Debbie and I'm like, yeah, not going to be a good session, that kind of stuff. But I want to keep it real because I remember what it's like to watch webinars like this and see people that are on kind of like on the other side of it. And I'm like, but I'm not there. Like, I can't do like it, and I'm still not there. And that's just reality. That's just truth. And that's okay. It's a life from now on. Once you're in betrayal trauma, this is a lifelong thing. Like it is not just part of your story. I don't want to be part of this club, but I am. And so I have to choose, am I going to be a victim or am I going to take the ugly part of my story and make that the most powerful part of my testimony?
Thank you. Yeah, and both of you have brought up triggers. And I mean, this is a big part of healing. And this is the area that tends to linger sometimes for years. And so, Shelley, what do you do within yourself and within your practice in regards to triggers? And how do you help women and yourself when they show up? Because this is a big conversation that comes up in the prodependence group is, I got triggered and, it all fell apart.
That's such a great question. I think one thing I established for myself early on was an emergency plan. And I did that with my therapist. So if I found myself really activated or triggered, I would pull up this file in my phone. I'm very heady and I'm always trying to figure things out. And so the first one was, you cannot try to figure this out right now. So you don't always make sense, right? They don't always make sense anyway. So it's like, you cannot try to figure this out. And then, it would kind of go into maybe some breathing and self-care. But it was like, when you get triggered, your brain goes offline and you can't think correctly. So like pulling it up and looking at it was really helpful. As time went on and I got a little stronger, I built my resilience. In yoga therapy, we deal a lot with the window of tolerance. So you start with what you can tolerate and take and you build. So I teach people breathing exercises, mental exercises. Sometimes movement is really good, mindfulness practices. Things like that are really wonderful. I know almost everyone I work with has ruminating thoughts. I wake up and I have ruminating thoughts. And there's a lot of really great breath work that you can do in visualization exercises and using affirmations. One of the things that has been the best things for me is tapping, like going through
Mm.
tapping with affirmations. I love that. I love working with people and doing that process. I also think self-compassion, right? Even now, me, eight years into it, we were cleaning out a closet. This was just a couple of months ago. And we're cleaning out this big closet in the basement. We're trying to, get rid of things. And he pulls down a bag and what is this? And it was my wedding dress. And it's like, he had acted out the day before our wedding. That was like part of my disclosure. And it's like, ugh, I see my wedding dress. And he's like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I know. And so we take it, like, what do you want to do with it? And I'm like, I don't want it. Like, I mean, whatever. It's been a long time. We've been married 24 years. And so I go upstairs and, I get some water and I sit with myself for a few minutes and I take a couple breaths. And, within an hour, I was fine. But you have to remember that's not going back. It's a normal part of life. It's a normal part of being, as you said, Carrie. Once you're in betrayal trauma, it's a lifelong commitment. But it gets better. My rebound time was pretty good. So, but having compassion for myself, right? Because I
Mhm.
could have said, oh, damn, now I'm triggered again. I thought I was healing. I thought I was okay. But instead of going into that spiral, let's accept it. This happened.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's great to share that with, the people listening, because I know triggers are a huge piece of the healing. And like I said, they do linger. And also, I think what you said, Shelley, which was befriending grief. And I know, Carrie, you and I had a chat the other day about how you are really managing to regulate in the midst of these emotions that are still coming up, because you're newly in this recovery compared to Shelley. And so how are you, Carrie, sort of befriending grief and also working with the triggers that are coming up, because you said you are so much better now than you were?
Yeah, good question. I am a big gym goer. So
Mm.
that is my happy place. That is where I can regulate. I can get the stress out. I'm at the gym about every day. But what I had to find was what self-care, self-care, self-care. Like I preach this to the people that I work with. Self-care is so, it sounds so selfish, but it is so vital and it's so important. So you need to find things that bring you joy, bring you happiness, can help you regulate your body. And so that's one thing that I do. I also breathing I'm also a yogi. I go on just on Saturday mornings though, Shelley, just on Saturday mornings. I do go to yoga, so I do the yoga breathing practices. I think that is amazing. I also just grounding, like go outside, put your feet in the earth, look up at the sky, and just do that breathing. I think that's huge. Um, and another thing that is really strange and weird, and I tell my clients this all the time, but a really good thing to kind of help you regulate is coloring. Does that sound weird? It literally really works. Like coloring, get an adult coloring book and color. And there's something about like the left and the right brain where it comes together when you're coloring. It's a great practice to do when you're feeling dysregulated, you don't know what to do and you're in the moment. If you have a coloring book handy, color. I don't know, it's weird to say that. It sounds so silly, but it really works. But I've learned that the grief will come, the feelings will come.
Mm.
Never know when they're going to hit you. And you do I hate feeling them. I hate it. I literally hate it. But you have to feel them. You have to feel it to get through it. And then, like Shelley said, as your window of tolerance can grow, you get better at doing that. And
Mm.
so those are just some of the things that I do to
Mhm.
try to. I also reclaim places. So when triggers happen, like places John and I used to go, or I still live in the house that we lived in when we were married. I've had to reclaim rooms of the house and redecorate or make it reclaim places and bring life back into those dead places that, would bring you triggers. And so that's something else that I
Hmm.
done a lot of.
That's great. Thank you. Those are great. Tammy, did you want to move to any of the questions by any chance?
Yes, we have a lot of questions. I want to thank you both so much for sharing. Shelley, when you were talking about like, I've got 8 weeks, I'm going to do the crash course on getting all better. And I was like, well, yes, of course we want to do that. So, but both of your, stories, and, you were talking about, Carrie, I think so much misperceptions and misinformation. And honestly, that is why seeking integrity, we are diligent about making sure the information that we post is, has merit. And, and you're both right. Nobody knows about this stuff until you have to, and so it is, it is a learning curve. Uh, uh, so one of the things I wanted, the medical, like, honestly, I hear so many partners that are struggling with, medical issues and things too. So that's real. And, even that you said his behaviors were killing you from the inside out, yes. And, but turning around and focusing on what I can do. Now, interestingly, Shelley, you stayed and he is in recovery, and Carrie, you left and he wasn't. But the reverse, like whether you stay or go, it can be regardless of what he chooses to do. So I wanted to, make that comment too. But yes, I'm going to start reading questions now. So if you guys want to follow along, you can click the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So I'm at the point in my own healing where I feel like I can either love myself or love him, but not both. How does one maintain any sense of self-respect when staying with someone who cheated on you with sex workers and mutual friends?
Okay. Anybody want to jump in on that one? Shelley, you want to?
Okay. So I think self-respect is really important. And if someone is continuing to abuse you psychologically, emotionally, whatever the betrayal might be, you have to pull up and find yourself and work on your strength, your own strength. However, saying all that, I think it's very possible, as human beings, we have the capacity to grow and to change. And when you begin this process of healing, you open up your heart. And there is the possibility for forgiveness. There is the possibility to see that we are all like broken, damaged little beings running around out here. And like this is just what the journey is, like unearthing all of the pain and the suffering and your own issues that you have, and growing and making yourself stronger. And so I think that if you're doing your work, that is possible, that you can still be with someone, you can still love that person who hurt you. I mean, we all hurt each other all the time. It's not like that's an exclusive thing to sex addiction. I don't know if I did a good job answering.
It's all
great.
good. So yeah, it's like this is judgment-free zone. So so the next one, and this is into you, Carrie, and I wanted to add, like, Carrie was sharing her very personal story, but we respect all faith, no faith. So, but Carrie shared her personal story, and this one says, this is a comment: "Thank you for reminding me about Jesus loving Judas perfectly, and Judas still betrayed Jesus because Judas is a betrayer. That is so impactful to my heart." So thank you for sharing that. And then Shelley, back to you. Why did you decide to stay, and what made it possible for you?
I decided to stay. Debbie actually asked me this question recently. I decided to stay because I saw him unraveling too. It wasn't like he's just this horrible person who like, ooh, let me do some bad things and ruin her life. He's a kind, wonderful, sensitive person, and these qualities were always in him. You know, I fell in love with him because he's a good person. Um, and so as I saw the addict, you know, the addict comes out strong when they get cornered. And I certainly saw that for that 7 months of the trickling, you know, disclosures. But I also saw him breaking. I saw his heart breaking. I saw him breaking. And he was, you know, he was at the point at the end where he was, you know, considering suicide.
Mhm.
This was hitting him hard too. Um, and I wanted to see, so he went away to residential treatment. This is another thing, and I think it's important. When I went to Family Week, they did a really nice presentation. You know, they talked to us all and gave us all kinds of information. And one of the things they said was, don't make any big decisions for a year. And of course, in, you know, my brain at that time, I was like, in 1 year, I will know what I'm going to do and I will make the decision. But 1 year rolled around and I didn't. But that gave me a buffer where I was like, okay, 1 year, I can just like step back and watch this and see what happens. And so that was really helpful for me too. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, why I stayed.
So we talk often from a codependent lens, and a codependent lens means you do see the good in those people. And, you know, there's nothing that you did or didn't do that caused any of this, but you have the ability to love someone in their brokenness. And, you know, I think that that's a really powerful message. We really work on, you know, the attachment wounds. You know, what you just said about, we talk about safe harbor, putting a relationship in safe harbor for whatever period of time. And I think that that's helpful for both parties, because then the partners aren't going every day, should I stay, should I go, should I stay, should I go. It's like, okay, we've got the space and we're going to see how this plays out, what actions there are, you know, and it's, you know, negotiable and renewable, and, you know, based on what things are doing. But, you know, just taking the pressure off, you know, each and both of you, you know, in that time frame. But Carrie, you also talked about, you know, like at some point I see often with partners when, you know, like sometimes like the head will know I need to go, you know, but the heart is still staying. And as soon as that aligns, you know, then people one way or the other, you know, but it has to be a decision that, you know, that is made, you know, head and heart, not just, you know, a reaction of like, oh, well, of course I'm going to leave, you know. So
Mhm. Just one other thing I wanted to
mhm.
add to Shelley's comment is that, you know, when I was working with Paul, the one thing that I noticed with he gave his addict a name, and his addict was Conrad. And so we had, you know, we had some in the midst of the darkness, we had some fun sessions, because he would honestly say to me in our sessions, Conrad showed up today. And, you know, it wasn't that he was acting out, it was the way he was treating people, or, you know, his reaction to people. So he was really being accountable in every way. And that, I think, also helped with you, Shelley, to be able to do your work, because you knew he was doing his work. And that was the difference, right? Is that Carrie, you know, said is that I'm doing my work and he's not doing his work. So that was really difficult. Yeah. So,
But some partners choose to stay for a multitude of reasons.
right.
But you know, with they have their tribe, they're doing their work, and they've created the safety for themselves, you know, within the context of, yes, this person is still acting out. Way tougher, you know, to choose to do that, but, you know, not impossible. I am going to hit we have our Empowered Women's Retreat coming up again in August, and that is amazing and healing. And guess what? We're empowering the women. We're not talking about him. You know, it really is, you know, doing the healing, you know, work, you know, for partners, healthy boundaries, the breath work you were talking about, emotions, you know, anger work, and all of those, getting in touch with that. But, you know, internal and external boundaries, you know, what people need. So I put that link in, and, you know, I would invite you to consider that if you're a partner, because you know, it's a shift, and an amazing shift in just a weekend. So Carrie, next question. Have you done your story work for yourself and your family of origin?
Yeah, Debbie and I have worked a bit on that. And it brought up some stuff that I was like, I don't know, why am I having to work on this, right? But it showed me a lot about my attachment style and why I was reacting in certain ways and how to manage that and come around that and show grace for myself, but then learn a healthy way to deal with that attachment style, and how to get into a healthier attachment style. So yeah, I have done a bit of family of origin stuff. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, and again, going back to the codependence, like the quick work is there's something wrong with you that you whatever, and we're going like, hey, if you want to do the family of origin work, great, you got enough stuff on your plate initially, like let's just deal with the trauma, the medical issues, all of that stuff happen, so let's deal with this. And then if you go, hey, there's some stuff back there that I'm ready to work on, great.
Yep.
Okay, next question. Betrayed partner here, and my SA partner is 1 year into recovery. He seems to have transformed magically after inpatient last year and claims he has not had any trouble changing his behavior. He does share a lot with me on his own volition, but I keep worrying that maybe it's all fake. I'm just curious to know how Carrie knew her husband was just learning the therapy lingo, but actually getting worse. What was his behavior like, and what was the tell, so to speak? Yeah, that's like massive red flags for me. So
That's a great question.
That is an
Yeah.
amazing question. When I learned very early in my recovery that when a man is in decent recovery, he will be different. You will see difference in him, in how he responds to you, how he relates to you, you will see it. And I was hearing John do a lot of future faking, like, oh yeah, like here's a little bit of hope to have, and then I would see nothing. And so I learned that it was consistency over time that was not happening, right? So he would say he was going to do this, he would say like the lingo of recovery, I'm going to do this is great, but I was seeing nothing over here. And so then I would I would ask him and he would get super defensive, like, I am doing my work, I am doing this stuff. And honestly, I wanted to say God bless him, because he's also in trauma. I mean, he didn't ask to be an addict. I think there's a really, really amazing man in there, and it's possible for him to find that, but he's going to have to do it. But for me, the tell was it's action over words every time.
Mhm.
And it has to be consistent. And if you don't see that, then that's a red flag that you need to at least be arm's length from him until you can decide either what you're going to do or wait longer to see if he decides to really show the action that's behind those words.
You were also saying too, Carrie, apart from the future faking, that there was this intermittent reinforcement that went on where, he would, say, I've joined a men's group and I'm really getting this and I really understand now. And so you would grab a hold of that and think, okay, we're on our way.
Good.
And then it would just all fall apart.
That's
Yeah.
where my health started to take a really bad turn, because there was never any rest for my soul the whole time. I was constant fight or flight. And so my body started to attack itself. Like it really just turned really ugly. Yeah.
One of I'm like compare and contrast, because like, Shelly had a not positive moment finding the wedding dress.
Mhm.
And Paul shows up and says, I'm really sorry, like rather than going like, oh, this is all going to be fine. And, like wasn't trying to minimize or anything else. So yeah, there's no magic, wand. There's no flip of a switch and poof, everybody's all better. And the more lip service I hear of like, yeah, I got this, that, and I don't care what form of addiction, addiction is a maladaptive coping mechanism. But so regardless of what form it is, that always is like, I'm concerned. So okay, next question. Carrie, once you get to I won't and I can't do this any longer, as he didn't lace up his boots, which was a great analogy, after years and knowing I did everything I could for marriage, him and myself, what first steps do you recommend before notifying him I'm done? We're separated. I left our joint owned house 15 months ago, out of state, emotional safety and health, 34-year marriage.
I'm so sorry. First of all, I'm really sorry that you're dealing with that. It's hard. This is really hard, but what I would recommend is you kind of get your ducks in a row, right? So I would approach an attorney. I would find out what your rights are. I would find out what are your rights? What in your state? What does it look like for you? I would find everything out about the finances in your family. Find, if you need to start putting money away for yourself slowly, I would get yourself a really strong group, a really strong small group of women that can come around you, because this is going to be really hard. I hate to be Debbie Downer, but this is tremendously difficult to leave. Especially, I'm so sorry, after 34 years, like it's horrible. But I would find some safety for you. I would get some ducks in a row so you know kind of what's going to happen, and then you know then you I would let him know. But get yourself safe first and kind of put together before you make any, because you don't know how he's going to react, and that's the unknown is really scary there.
And I'm gonna, like, we've had people that have come to the Empowered Women's Retreat. Like, that is not just for people who are staying. Like, the empowerment and the support you would get at that, like, that would be an amazing thing for you to choose to do for yourself too. So please consider that. Okay, the next question. I've been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder since discovery. It flares up specifically when I feel detached from my partner and I'm not confronting things, as well as when I start to think of leaving. I feel like it only speaks to my dependence. Whenever I try to be independent, it flares up. Any advice on this?
Well, speaking from somebody who has an autoimmune disease, it's going to flare up when you're stressed. So the stress is what, for me, stress will flare up. Of course, I have to be careful what I eat too, but depending on what your autoimmune disorder is. But that's like where we were talking about self-care. Like, how can you manage your stress? How can you manage your triggers? How can you keep yourself safe? All of those things come in play, especially when you're dealing with an autoimmune disease. And you know what? There's going to be times where you can't, like, if you just, for instance, like for me, when I decided to leave, that was super stressful. And I had some health kickbacks from that, but it was a necessary evil for me to have to do what I had to do. But I would just really recommend, like, how can you lower that stress level for yourself? How can you take care of yourself? How can you find people that can speak life and love to you while you're dealing with all of this? I think that will help.
So, and I can't help but think, Troy Love talks about abandonment wounds, and I'm like, this feels like an attachment wound, and specifically an abandonment wound. And so working on that so that it isn't an abandonment, that you are, choosing, and know that you're choosing for the greater good for you, may be useful. Just a suggestion. Okay. The next one, this is a great one. And I think, Shelley, how do you know if your husband is truly in recovery and not faking through it?
Well, two things. I think Carrie already addressed one, which is they act different. So you're used to dealing with an addict who is defensive and dishonest and manipulative and gaslights you. And when you start to learn about those things, if you don't already, you can pick them right out. So someone who's in recovery may still have, those patterns or those tendencies, but they also recognize them. It's a learning process. So one is they act differently, like 100%. And two is, you are getting in touch with your knowing, and that is the most important aspect of healing. I don't want to generalize, but every single person that I've worked with thus far has said, I always felt like something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And now you know. And once you know, you develop that intuition and you will never not know. So it's that muscle, learning to trust yourself. And that's really hard because I think you said too, Carrie, like, how did I not know that this was happening? How did I make this mistake? And you beat yourself up and you wonder what you did wrong. I mean, my husband was an addict before I even ever met him. He had these behaviors in his teenage years. Um, so you learn to cultivate trust in yourself, and then you know.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I agree 100%. Shelley, like every single woman that I've worked with that has said something's not right, and they have, pursued that intuition, they've always been correct. And they have learned to shut it down, either because of their family of origin and that message, society and that message, or living with an addict and that message. And so, that's part of my work, is to listen to your intuition.
there's a lot of things that addicts take away from us in betrayal trauma. They take away our sense of self. They take away our self-worth, our value, and they take away our gut instinct. Like I was always so good at trusting my gut, but the amount of gaslighting and manipulation stopped me from trusting my gut. And so that was just another thing he took from me. And that's something, a learning thing that you have to learn to really, like they say, you've got three brains, here, here, and here. And that gut brain is huge. You need to listen to it. If you feel like there's something going on, then there is.
Mhm.
And I do, I think that that is key. And yes, addict behavior is so focused on hanging on to the acting out behaviors that, yeah, the lies and manipulation and gaslighting. Denial is, I'm lying to myself first, and then I can lie to everybody else as well. So I appreciate both of us. So the next one is just a big thank you for your vulnerability, time, and well-spoken share. So that's, thank you for that. And then gaslighting and denial slows me down. It's like my legs are gone and I can't move. I try so hard to heal. Thoughts? Any comments on that?
That is really hard. Gaslighting, it's like, again, like with the gut thing, it's like you start to question everything about yourself, everything you're doing, everything about yourself. It's like I remember I felt like I was walking through quicksand. I would take a step and then I would fall, and then I would take a step and I would fall. And I realized I couldn't heal being connected to him. I had to disconnect. And even if you choose to stay, you can disconnect with love and heal yourself so that you can start to move again and you can start to get some healing. Again, keep him at arm's length for a while you work on you, and that will help you get on firmer ground.
Yeah, that's healthy boundaries. And it sounds like you can really relate with the quicksand, like slugging through quicksand. So Shelley, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, I was just going to say, setting boundaries with people. If people are going to treat you, if your person is going to treat you like that and do those things, then you have to set boundaries to protect yourself.
Well, that leads right into the next question. Shelley, what type of boundaries worked well as you and your husband healed? What consequences worked well for you?
Wow. So I think in the very beginning, when things were the most tenuous, the boundaries of when something would happen, when there would be a breach of, honesty, or some of the old behaviors would come back, it would be, let's go to our corners. You need to go make an appointment. You talk to your sponsor. Or I'm not saying, I didn't say you need to do that. The idea was, the boundary was, when things weren't going well, you amped up your own recovery. You saw, your therapist 2 times that week. So getting more outside help, working with your sponsor. My husband was very fortunate to get hooked up with a men's group right away when he came out of residential, and they were all a year ahead of him. And so that was really wonderful because they gave him a lot of perspective. So it was utilizing, I think the support network was a huge success for us.
Mhm.
So the next question, what tools and thoughts would you give someone staying with an active addict?
Oh, boundaries, lots of boundaries, lots of self-care, lots of self-help, lovingly detaching. That's tough. That's tough.
And
It is. And
remembering what boundaries are, right, Tammy?
yes, they are not punishment. They are not control. They are about safety, physical, financial, emotional, spiritual safety. We talk a lot about that in the Empowered Women's Retreat, internal and external boundaries. And it sounds so complicated, and it is and it isn't. You know, each person's boundaries are a little different, you know, other than, you know, physical violence is never acceptable. But it's one of those things where, you know, determining what you need, you know, there's some basic things like you guys were saying, okay, this person needs to be held, you know, a little further distance because they're not safe right now for me, you know, and finding your own grounding. But the internal boundaries, and I hear both of you saying that, like, I'm taking care of me, so I'm holding my internal boundaries about that, regardless of what this person's doing or not doing. Um, it's because you know, you are the only person that for sure can value you. The addict, you know, is on a learning curve if they're in recovery, and eventually they can show up, but regardless, it's like, this person isn't safe for me, I need to take care of me. So it's so important. And when, you know, when you have been told forever that, oh no, that's not really happening, like, it's hard to even start to think along those lines. So
And just one other thing too that I've noticed with working with partners who do stay with the addict is that they can get into this loop of trying to get the addict to get it. And so it's sending them podcasts, sending them webinars, finding therapists for them, finding a sponsor for them. And that is, you know, that never works out well, because then resentment sets in on both sides. And so, you know, the boundaries are for you. They're not for, you know, the partner. Sorry, for the addict. They're for you to be able to say, I'm not going to do this. They're not punitive or demanding. So
well, and you're right, and it puts a parental role of like, I'm, you know, you're my, you know, 6-year-old, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do to be a good boy, and that doesn't help. And so do I get lots of people who reach out, partners who are reaching out to ask about the residential treatment for? Absolutely, and that's all great. You know, I've got, you're willing to do the research and start. So but at some point, you know, the person has to, you know, has to step into the space, you know, and you know, and show you. It's like you guys were saying, it's the actions. What am I willing to do, you know, not just lip service. So okay, here's a toughie. I'm engaged to be married later this year. My partner has been working recovery for over a year. He had a recent slip, and it's been really difficult on our relationship. During the last month, I've also learned new information around when we first started dating years ago, and also around the time we got engaged. A lot of reality feels unreal, tainted, and painful. Feeling a lot of confusion, shame, and fear, and decision making on staying or going. Any advice appreciated?
That's really hard. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I would, I hope that you have a good therapist. You need to really surround yourself with people who know this addiction, and can kind of guide you. I would, I would be cautious. Would be really cautious. I'm not sure what else to say about that, but that's tough.
and not let the wedding planning be the catalyst to push you into this, that you do have a choice. If you want to buy yourself time, you don't have to make a decision to amputate him. But certainly, I think, is to not feel pressured to go through this if you are concerned about the future.
Just like they were saying, trust your gut. I can't tell you how many people have like, we have a destination wedding all planned, we have to do this, you know, and it invariably doesn't go well. So him really shoring up his recovery, and honestly, stressful occasions, weddings, birth of children. You know,
Mhm.
addicts who are vulnerable are more likely to act out. Sad and true. So trust your gut and like, you know, like these women are sharing. This is a lifelong journey. Now, life is a lifelong journey, you know, but he will never not be an addict. And for many people, you know, like if he's really on a recovery journey, you know, it's a game changer. And but I hear you being in a very vulnerable place, and he's not really in recovery if he's having slips and you're learning more information. So trust your gut.
Mhm.
Next question. Thinking about addiction as a generational problem, how much of your decision to stay or go was based on your SA partner's ability to parent? My teenage son has OCD-like behavior that's being addressed with medication and his therapist. It's clear to me now that my husband enabled my son's obsessive gaming behavior to keep my focus off his SA and spending addiction. Now that my SA husband is in therapy and attending SAA meetings, his eyes are finally opening to our son's obsessive behavior. I'm concerned that my SA husband will relapse and my son will follow his poor model. So to me, this is like fear, you know, and false evidence appears real, and future tripping. You have today, and you know, and these women will both attest. You know, what are you doing to, you know, eyes wide open, watch your husband's actions. He's in therapy and attending SAA meetings. If he's just warming a seat in a meeting, that doesn't really help. If he's working the steps, talking to his sponsor, if he's doing the work, he's going to show up differently. And just like, you know, Shelley was saying, you know, her husband showed up differently. As Carrie was saying, her husband did not, you know. So you know, you have enough on your plate for right now. So being concerned about what's going to happen in the future, you know, you can be aware, but to be focused on that, you know, I would invite you to do just like they're talking about grounding, take care of yourself in the moment, you take some self-care. So thoughts, ladies? Okay, then we'll move on to the next one. Husband betrayed me for 30 years, recently retired D-Day 3 years ago, sought much help and counseling, and like other women here, did not even know what SA was. He says he's been sober 3 years, but his IA is out of this world, ignores me, avoids me, absolutely refuses to connect, which inhibits trust building. He refuses to do the work, and just this last weekend left after being married after 46 years. Not easy. I just turned 65. I see God's leading since leaving. In your experience, does leaving make it worse, or will he wake up and seek his own recovery?
Oh, my leaving didn't do anything to John. He didn't have any emotion around it. I've never seen him cry. I've never seen any remorse there. Whether you choose to stay or go can't depend on if that's going to do something to him. It's all about you. You can't say, well, if I leave, he's gonna, like, the lights are gonna come off and he's gonna come back. You don't know that. So you have to do this based on you. What's best for you, where you feel like you can grow and you can be safe. You can't make your decision based on maybe this time he'll get it. Maybe if I file for divorce, he'll, like, I've been through, I filed for divorce, I think, Debbie, how many times? Twice. You know, the second time took, but yeah, that's really hard. I would, again, you work on you, what's best for you. It doesn't matter. He's going to do what he's going to do, whether you decide to stay or go.
Mhm.
Okay, next question. My PA acts differently in many ways, does a lot of work, recognizes his narcissistic behaviors or externalizing problems or defensiveness, yet it still happens. And he recently disclosed he was lying for about the past 2 years, with disclosure and many things he kept back or betrayals he did throughout the past 2 years. I really struggle figuring out how to gauge veracity of behaviors because of this.
Hmm.
it's hard to form new brain patterns. You know, when you've been doing something for such a long time, you have neural pathways in your brain that, you know, keep those grids lit up. And, you know, I think even someone with the best of intentions in recovery can relapse into dishonest behavior or, you know, whatever it is. So there does have to be an element of patience and curiosity about where things are going. And I mean, I don't want to just keep repeating like trust your inner instincts, but it's not going to be perfect right off the bat. I mean, I know in this scenario, my story is you know, a little bit successful, but there were horrible times within the first 3 years of, you know, Conrad coming back, and it didn't necessarily mean that he was acting out, but it just, you know, he lived 50 something years of his life this way. It takes a long time to make those changes.
Mhm. And what stands out to me with this is also the lying for the past 2 years. And you know, the need for you to figure out how to gauge the behaviors. Is that, you know, I'm just going by what you're writing in the question, but that you are taking on trying to gauge the behaviors rather than working on boundaries for yourself, so that you really don't have to gauge the behaviors. You have to protect yourself from the behaviors. So this is where these boundaries come in, because, you know, if your you know, if your partner has been lying for the last 2 years, you know, we have a greater problem here than just a few behaviors. So that's what stands out to me in you know, reading this question. So
And I'm curious about what has happened recently that he is willing to fess up that he's been lying for 2 years. Because I'm a tiny bit hopeful that he's getting an inkling of like, wait, I'm not doing this right. I need to, you know, I can do better. So like to me, you know, healthy boundaries for you, but it's also like, I wonder if he's finally going like, oh, wait, I'm not doing this with integrity and I need to really step into this space. So I would be super curious and have that conversation with him. I would just say, you know, why are you bringing this now? You know, and you know, and we tell partners, addict partners all the time, don't do a disclosure unless you're willing to be truthful, because otherwise this always comes out and it makes things worse. It just sets everything back. And not invariably, but often we hear about this, you know, later of like, oh, I didn't tell you the truth, you know, or I didn't tell you the whole truth because I was afraid. And you know, it's scary, I get it. And you know, but disclosure is to set a foundation for healing, to help, you know, people be on a you know, on a new path. So you know, in 12-step we talk about half measures availed us nothing, and unfortunately this happens. But I would be super curious, like, why now? You know, why is he, you know, bringing truth forward, and what is he willing to do now that will be different than what he's been doing for the last 2 years? So those would be all me curious questions. Okay. So last question, because we've got another webinar starting shortly, and I did put WeTonglen.com as a partner organization. So yes, www.wetonglin.com is an organization you can join if it's only women, and it's only partners, but it's peer supported. So last question, and there's so many good ones yet. I'm sorry we won't get to them. My partner has been in recovery for 20 months. He maintains that he has no triggers or edging or temptations. I find it hard, impossible to believe that after 20 years of betrayal that he is magically able to shut off the acting out behavior. Can addicts just switch off their addiction? As the only person probably in this room that is an addict, no. That is, you are right. That is not, you know, no, it leaks out somewhere else, or we switch to another form of acting out. There is no magic flipping of a switch. Even if we're doing the recovery work, you know, I still do my recovery work after decades. So trust your gut. You find it impossible to believe, you are right. Thoughts?
100%. I agree 100%, Tammy, on that. Like, I know that addicts would like, you know, the people around them to believe that, you know, I've just stopped acting out, so I'm good. but that is, you know, the tip of the iceberg. Everything under the water is the work that needs to be done. So
I'm going
yeah.
to end with this one too. Do you color with crayons, pencils, or markers?
I color with markers, because I don't have to sharpen anything, and they have a lot of pretty colors. So
There you go. And I did not know that, but during COVID, I was doing the coloring and I was like, oh my gosh, there really is like, there's something to that. Okay. So there you go.
yeah.
So I'm going to thank you all for, thank you, Debbie, for bringing this idea
You're
to me.
welcome.
And thank you guys for being willing and vulnerable and sharing your personal stories and journeys. I'm incredibly grateful. To those of you joining, this webinar will be posted on the Seeking Integrity site yet today. I'll make sure it gets up. Grateful for the questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. If you're looking to reach out to any of them, reach out to me and I will connect you with any of them as well. So thanks, everyone. Thank you. Grateful.
Thank you, Tammy.